On behalf of Polis Project, I'm warmly welcoming Dr. Ravi Chopra and Dr. Navin Juyal. I consider them the creme de la creme of the community of concerned people to advise us on this very topical issue which concerns the life and livelihood of the Himalayan region. It also affects people in the flood plains below the Himalayas, and I'm very happy to have them here because they are experts who happen to be inhabitants of Uttarakhand, and also they are supposed to be quite globally renowned. They have played a great role in India also. So we are going to focus on the issue of the Himalayan natural disasters, so-called natural disasters that have taken place, and they have created a lot of havoc in this monsoon, particularly, mostly in the northwest of India. So these disasters appear to be occurring with increasing frequency and magnitude over the recent years. And most of you must have seen videos and the reports of the huge landslide that took place, a flash flood which demolished a lot of buildings in a village called Dharali. It's supposed to be the last village on the way to the mouth of the Ganges in Uttarakhand. So that village has been very at the focus of the Himalayan tragedies that are occurring over the last few weeks in Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh, Jammu, and all of this region happens to be the northwest portion of the Indian subcontinent and an important part of the Hindu Kush Himalayas. So the monsoons have struck the Himalayas a little later in June, that's on 21st and 20th of June or so. And ever since then, there have been a spate of disasters. Dharali was just one of them. So we are calling upon opinions from Dr. Juyal, who happens to be a very accomplished geologist from the esteemed Physical Research Laboratory of Ahmedabad. And after his retirement also, he's been very actively researching on the field as a field scientist and constantly advocating in the interests of the common people, particularly in view of the ecological challenges before us in the Himalayas. And Dr. Ravi Chopra, an engineer by qualification basically, he gave up his promising career for himself and founded and steered the renowned People's Science Institute in Dehradun, which now happens to be churning out a lot of trained youngsters who want to make a career with a sort of social bent of mind. And he was appointed by the India's Supreme Court as chair of two successive committees who sort of reviewed various dam projects and proposals to widen the roads across the Himalayan region. And all this happened, his appointment as chairman, has happened in the wake of a catastrophic flood, a flash flood in 2018 in a very high altitude shrine of the Hindus called Kedarnath. And Dr. Juyal was his science comrade in arms on that committee. First it was an expert committee appointed in 2013 or 14, and then a high-powered committee. So one of the committees deliberated on reviewed the dam projects, and the other one was on the road widening proposal. So correct me if I'm wrong, Raviji and Navinji, but as far as I gather, your singular achievement as people scientists has been a Supreme Court moratorium in 2014 on environmental clearances to new dam construction for hydroelectric projects in Uttarakhand. And in the wake of the Kedarnath disaster, now, however, the government of India still wants to continue with those dams with slight design modifications. But despite the best of your scientific efforts, it was not possible to prevent the further widening of highways in the hills in the name of all-weather connectivity for pilgrims headed towards the 4 major Hindu shrines in the Gadwal Himalayas and another in the Kumaon region right across the Chinese border. So, as has been well reported, the government prevailed on the Supreme Court in December 2020, and the Supreme Court allowed the highway widening for pilgrimages because the government played the military card, citing border security considerations. And now, all of a sudden, we find the same Supreme Court just a few weeks ago expressing a deep concern and sort of pressing the panic button on the ecology question in the context of Himachal Pradesh. It was a case of a corporate claim over a green belt in Shimla, and there the Supreme Court remarked that Himachal Pradesh might vanish one day. So it was so concerned suddenly, all of a sudden. So this differences that come out, that we see in various orders and remarks of the Supreme Court, it is a question to be considered. So we will now turn over to our guests, and they have whatever their experiences has been in the committee, the high-powered committee and the expert committee. I would like them to explain as to what they felt, what are those interests that have prevented a proper, appraisal of the challenges, the ecological challenges behind building dams and widening the roads. What are those interests that obstruct the proper consideration of the ecological challenges?
So, specifically, the Supreme Court took suo motu notice of the disaster that took place in June 2013 just under the shadows of the Kedarnath peak. It led to a flash flood in the Mandakini river. But at the same time, the intense rainfall was very widespread. You could say that from the western edge of Himachal Pradesh right up to the border of Nepal. So it covered the entire state of Uttarakhand. It led to record rainfall in a period of about 48 hours. After the disaster, in which the numbers vary, officially about 5,000 plus people lost their lives, unofficially those numbers are anywhere between 10 and 20,000. Now, the court asked the expert body that we were part of, to first study whether dams have had any negative environmental impacts in Uttarakhand. They said, we don't want to hear about what has happened in any other part of the world. Just tell us the impact of dams on the environment in Uttarakhand. The second was whether the dams that had already been commissioned, whether they had a deleterious effect on the floods disaster. And the third issue placed before us was that the Wildlife Institute of India had recommended to the Ministry of Environment and Forests that 24 dams in the Alaknanda Bhagirathi basin, that the two rivers then meet to form the Ganga. There were 70 dams proposed there, and WII, the institute, proposed that 24 of them should be reconsidered. Okay. Now, our main findings to the court were that yes, the dams in Uttarakhand have a lifelong impact on the environment. And there are several types of impacts. For example, the integrity of the rivers and the ecosystem of the rivers on which the dams are built, that is destroyed. It leads to loss of forests. There is weakening of the slopes, and concomitant social impacts. For example, there are fissures that develop on agricultural lands. There are cracks that emerge in housing buildings. So these were very, as well as the loss of springs, these were very clear social impacts. We also went and through the entire valleys, Bhagirathi, Alaknanda and the Mandakini, which feeds into the Alaknanda, and we saw the damage done at 4 locations, 4 dams,
Okay.
with sizes ranging from about 76 megawatts to 400 megawatts. We were able to show from our field investigations that dams worsened the floods disaster.
Worsened.
Worsened. And we specified the kinds of impacts at 4 locations. In fact, one dam was just wiped out. It was demolished by the flood. There was a dam up in the upper reaches of the Alaknanda, a 400 megawatt hydropower station, which got wiped out, and there was the company had its offices and helipad by the side, and that entire slope disappeared. So, and this was primarily because the dam was just unable to obstruct the flood in the river, and I'll come back to this in a moment. At Srinagar, there was another dam on the Alaknanda, which was 330 megawatts, and there the water level behind the dam rose dangerously, and the gates were opened. Once the gates were opened and the mass of water came rushing down, there was a huge pile of muck that had been excavated to build a canal for transferring the water to the powerhouse, as well as a tunnel before the canal was in advance of the canal. And all this had been piled up downstream of the dam along the slope. That got washed into the town, and the town by the riverside was probably somewhere about 30 feet under sand. In fact, a government building, a training institute, all you can see is the top of the dome, the rest of the building is buried. So we were able to show that the dams had a deleterious impact. And in this town of Srinagar, where this major disaster took place, the local people then sued the company for the disaster and the damage and destruction of their homes, and the court gave them ordered a compensation of almost 100 million rupees. Now, the third question was about the 24 dams, and we had originally agreed that all 24 were to be cancelled. But then one of our official members objected, and in order to get unanimity, we said, okay, 23 are to be just cancelled. The 24th may be built with the following conditions. Okay? Now, what is the situation? The case about the dams in these 2 river basins still is in court. Okay? But in August of 21, the Prime Minister's office stated in an affidavit to the court that out of the 70 dams, 19 had been commissioned before the flood disaster, and they were functional. Out of the remaining 51, the Prime Minister's office affidavit said that 7 dams may be permitted to continue their construction because they said that more than half the work had been done. Not exactly correct, but that was their argument. And therefore, the remaining 44 may be cancelled. Okay. So, in a sense, it's a very big victory as I see it. And the last thing that I wanted to point out was that in the analysis of the nature of the disaster that had taken place in the hydropower project in the upper reaches of the Alaknanda, the 400 megawatt, that barrage, it wasn't a very high or a big dam.
Is that the Vishnu Prayag?
Vishnu Prayag project, and that lies in what is known as the paraglacial zone. This is a region of the Himalayas where the glaciers have receded in the past, and as you go higher and higher, the valleys get narrower. Just about a kilometer upstream of the barrage, a small river called the Khiro Ganga comes and meets the Alaknanda. Its basin had also received very heavy rainfall, and the combination of rain, wet snow, ice started to move down, and as it moved down, it began to gather speed, and with that energy that it gets, it begins to move a lot of the moraines that are lying in its valley, and all that moraine gets pushed down the valley. Now the valley is not uniform in width. Somewhere it's narrow, somewhere it's broad, and in the narrow portion, Navin came to the conclusion that a temporary dam may have formed naturally, but with more water coming from the back of the dam burst, and all that energy of the bursting of the dam gets absorbed by the river. It moves further down with greater slope, and that this may have happened at 2 or 3 different locations. So by the time it comes into the Alaknanda and meets the barrage, it is full of energy, and it broke the side of the barrage, found a new way to exit, and in the process cut the slope on which the company's offices and helipad was located. So we drew the conclusion that it is no longer to be considered safe to build any dams in the paraglacial regions. Okay. So that was, I think, perhaps to me, it was the most important finding of the committee.
Okay.
So
could Dr. Juyal explain what is glacial and paraglacial a little bit, so that the lay audience would get an idea of how
of course, the paraglacial is a word coined way back in 1974 by some scientists. An area which is not in directly contact with the glacier, but it is conditioned by the glacier, implying that glacier is somewhere upstream, somewhere in a higher elevation. And this is the valley which is vacated by the glacier, as Dr. Ravi Chopra said this. So once the glacier moves backward, what it does, it leaves behind enormous quantity of unconsolidated debris that we call moraine, or in a loose term, broader term, paraglacial sediments. Now these sediments, when they get accumulated on the vacated valleys, 2 things happens. When the glacier was there, imagine, it was putting kind of a pressure on the valley walls, a kind of buttressing pressure. Now when the glacier swings, both horizontally and vertically, it goes backward. So this is what debuttressing effect. The slopes become quite sensitive and unstable. To a very even small perturbation of any form can create a kind of a chain reaction on the valley slope. So they will start collecting down into the river where the sediments are piling up. And these sediments, during the extreme weather events, they tend to move down. I call them, these sediments, as they are the army. They are the army. The army sitting over there, and waiting for a command from a Subedar Major. The moment Subedar Major is an extreme weather event. The moment the Subedar Major says that go and attack, they just start rolling down. Now what the army wants, the army, the settlements want, they do not want any obstruction on their way. But what we have done, as you rightly said, that we started obstructing their free flow path. And I can assure you, as you rightly pointing out, that if you leave the paraglacial area away from the intervention of human activities, particularly in the name of river valley projects, I can tell you that the disaster sound would not going to happen. Certainly not. I am just digressing a little bit because the damn things are coming up. 2021, February 7th, that Rishi Ganga disaster. On 6th of February 2021, I was standing on the same rainy bridge and I was trying to look into the evidence of past cloth.
The rainy village, you mean?
Yeah, I was standing there on 6th of February, trying to understand are there evidence of past glacial lake outburst flood sediments stuck along the valley sides. And it was a sunny day, very beautiful day. Then I moved out to Josimat and next day morning I moved out. When I was on the way, I am told that the entire river got activated and the bridge is swept away. Now,
The bridge where you were standing?
yes,
the day
swept
before.
away. There is really swept away. Now the question is this, that I am still telling you that when I asked my friends who went there after the flood, I said, how far the flood traveled? They said the flood traveled to 25 to 30 kilometers, maybe maximum 40 kilometers. After that, it is difficult for you to even find the trace of that particular flood of Rishi Ganga disaster, because that flood was triggered by an avalanche. It was a rock glacial avalanche. There was no such huge, we call them pro-glacial lake, the lake which is formed in front of the glacier. When the glacier starts moving backward, there is a moraine dump in front of it. So between this space, you create a puddle of water. And this is called the pro-glacial lakes. So there was no lake as such. So there was no water. And there was no rain. So this material, when it's descending down with a cascading velocity, because the Ronti Ghat from where it generated is like this, and then came down to Rishi Ganga, and it obstructed Rishi Ganga for some time, and then what happened? It wanted to move down into the Dholi Ganga. Ultimately, Rishi Ganga moved to the Dholi Ganga. But then it encountered first barrage of Rishi Ganga hydropower project, which is above the bridge. It was above the bridge. So this material came and got obstructed over there, and that's there it started accumulating more sedimentary water. So it's a kind of a force amplification. Then I've got those videos. I've seen those videos very closely. That got busted. It broke that particular barrage. As it came to the bridge, if you closely watch the video, the water is trying to find a way through the road. But then, because the material was so much that it started pushing the bridge. But before it broke the bridge, it stayed there for a couple of seconds. The bridge also obstructed it. And finally, in 10 minutes time, it went to the under construction Tapoban hydropower barrage, where 200 odd people are still missing or dead. The point is this: if there would not have been any barrage, there would not have been any destruction. So therefore, the paraglacial term, which was coined in 1974, and a lot of work has been done in Alps and other. Unfortunately, in Himalaya, this was coined under his chairmanship when he was the chairman of the hydropower committee. We started stressing upon it. Now at least people are talking about it. What they are doing in terms of protecting that particular paraglacial zone, still is a distant dream. I cannot tell you any more on that. That's what it is.
So, in this particular sequence, can we move on to the
Char Dham Pariyojana,
yes, the road winding, the Char Dham.
I think this should be started, then I can join you in that, because he's the person.
Yes,
That's better.
certainly.
So the Prime Minister announced a very ambitious project to widen roads in the Himalayan region to take tourists and pilgrims to these 4 shrines of the Hindus, and there was a 5th one of the 6. So though we say that 4 shrines, Char Dham, we forget the 6th shrine. And so there's one road about 275 or 300 kilometers from Rishikesh to Badrinath, which is the Badrinath shrine. The Badrinath road has an offshoot at Rudraprayag, about 175 kilometers from here.
From Rishikesh?
From here, from Rishikesh.
From, yes, sir. Yeah.
Approximate.
From the base of the hills, basically.
Yeah.
Halfway.
To, yeah. And it forks off at Rudraprayag and goes to the base of the Kedarnath mountain.
Right.
And then the people have to trek up to the Kedarnath shrine.
Yeah, 16 kilometers.
Right.
Trek, yeah.
There is another road from Rishikesh which goes up to the town of Gangotri in the Bhagirathi Valley. Okay?
Okay.
And in that valley, at the end is the Gangotri shrine. All right. And about 19 kilometers past Gangotri is a trek which you can go to the mouth of the Ganga, which is called Gaumukh. On this road, at a place called Dharasu, which is probably about 35 kilometers before Uttarkashi, the road again, there's another road that takes off to the Yamunotri shrine.
Right.
Okay, so these were the Char Dham roads, and they tacked on another, asked us to look at the widening of another road in the eastern part of our state, Kumaon division, where from Tanakpur all the way up to Pithoragarh. And I don't remember the exact figures, I think it's about 165 kilometers. Okay. The existing roads had to be widened to a tarred surface of 10 meters width. Existing road may have been about 5.5 to 7 meters at different locations.
Maybe somewhere less also.
Yeah, somewhere is less also. And in addition, it was going to have two shoulders. So this is the tarred surface is 10 meters on which the vehicles can run. And then on the side are about 1.5 meters for the drainage from the slope, and about 1 meter on the other side, or 1.5 meters for putting up a crash barrier. So 12.5 to 13 meters width. Now, to make this 13-meter width, they have to cut the mountain slope. Okay. And the implementation agencies, construction agencies, were given the right of way up to 24 meters. So from the valley slope, they could go as much as 24 meters into the mountain side, and that was their right of way. So you can imagine that it led to a lot of destruction of the slopes.
Yes. Okay.
And we looked at several aspects of this whole project. We not only looked at the road widening aspect, but also hill cutting, how the hills were cut, and whether they had introduced new weaknesses, new weak zones in the mountains. We looked at the alignment of bypasses and tunnels to see whether better alignments could have been, which would have saved some of the environmental forests and so on. We also looked at basically the impact on the rivers, because typically, though the law says that you can't throw the muck that you generate from all this slope cutting, you can't throw it into the river below. But that's typically what is done. Mm-hmm. So the implementing agencies were supposed to build muck dumps. So we looked at the muck dumping, we looked at the review of the whole process, and we went along every single kilometer of these 5 roads. Alright? And we made, from time to time, we made recommendations of how to improve things. Now, In all, we made probably about 35 recommendations on which there was total unanimity. So the committee is composed of something like 21, actually 22 officials or government scientists, and the three of us were Naveen, Dr. Himalayan, and I. We were the independent scientists on that committee. So we had unanimity on all except one aspect, which was how wide should be the road. We argued very strongly that based on what we had seen and what we had discussed with our colleagues, almost everybody agreed that the way things were being done was not right and that needed to be changed. But on the issue of the width of the road, we insisted that almost all the troubles that we have seen are directly related to how wide the cutting is taking place. And therefore, this needs to be narrow. Okay.
A sort of regulation you were insisting.
Yeah. And the government officials and scientists fell in line with the government's choice of 10-meter carriageway or tarred surface. So this led to an impasse, and the court had given the direction that in case of disagreement, you have to take a vote. I find this to be a very strange way of handling a scientific issue. And you have to take a vote. Science doesn't work by democracy in most cases. And we were in a minority. Now, even as the report was finalized, Dr. Dhyani came across a notification of the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, which was dated March 23rd, 2018.
2018.
Okay. And in that notification, I think the first paragraph says to the effect that after adopting the 10-meter width regulation in 2012, the experience since then in the mountain regions has been that this is unsuitable for mountain regions because there have been a number of landslides, there is loss of forest, there is loss of life, and therefore it recommended that the width should be reduced, and it recommended 5.5 meters width for mountain roads, up to a passenger car carrying capacity of, I think, about 9,000 passenger cars per day. Okay. And so most of this road would have been 5.5 meters according to that specification. And once we came across that specification, we circulated it to all the committee members and said, if you want to change your mind, you can do so. We ended up with 13 votes in favor of the 10 meters, 5 votes against the 10-meter width. So we had to go to court, and in the court, Naveen and Dr. Dhyani, both of them had written an extensive analysis of why we should favor a disaster resilient road rather than a wide road. Because of the enormous fragility of the mountain ranges and the increasing susceptibility to landslides in various sections of these roads. So to minimize that, it was argued by the three of us that in keeping with the ministry's direction of 2018, that the road width should be limited to 5.5 meters, which that court accepted, but it was challenged later by the government. The government demanded, went back to its 10-meter claim, and a later court accepted the government.
So, the government went against its own notification.
Yes. Yes.
So So that notification must have had some rationale earlier.
Yes, they gave the rationale. They saw the disaster and gave the rationale. They said there was 5 years of experience had shown it. That this 10-meter width doesn't work in the mountain ranges.
So sir, why do you think the slopes are so unstable in the Himalayas, and what is the geological reason for
Of course, we all know that Himalaya is a quite young mountain, relatively speaking, and the mountain building activities are still going on. So that is being manifested by recurrent earthquake. So that makes the rocks quite susceptible in terms of their strength. That's one thing. Second thing is that the variability in the rock types. When I'm talking about variability, I'm talking about their competence. It changes within a kilometer. Third thing is that this is a monsoon dominated month. Of course, you can say that eastern part is much more monsoon dominated compared to this part, but then nevertheless it gives an average out of quite a good amount of monsoon precipitation. Therefore, the slopes are extremely fertile. Okay. And they are precariously balanced. Okay. So long you don't tamper with them, they remain stable. Of course, they get activated, but then again they come to standstill condition. One thing very important, let me tell you. When people talk about the earthquakes in Himalaya, so I tell my students, it's nothing very unique, that earthquakes is a process that is being dictated by the continuous movement of the Indian plate through the north. It's continuously moving, only probably somewhere the rates are changing. So the deformation caused by the movement of the Indian plate is a continuous process. But the climate is a cyclic process. So this cyclic process of climate, when I say climate, I'm using a long term. But you can say that the extreme weather, you can assume like that. When they bounce upon this terrain, they create a catastrophe. So our contention was this, that when you are going for a blanket excavation of 10-meter wide road and these kind of slopes, then you are likely to meet challenges which are going to become very surprising to you. Okay? And once they trigger, you will not be able to contain them. That's what our thing is. Okay? So we are asking that do not go for a uniform cutting of this area. Mm-hmm. Second, we said that there is a lot of studies already being done by various people. Of course, it was not in a mission mode kind of thing, but at an individual basis, a lot of studies have come out and they have given you a blueprint of the terrain and how to go about it. Give an example. Tota Ghati, which is something like 35-40 kilometers from this. This Tota Ghati is on a rock we call them limestone and bit of sandstone kind of stuff and some plain rocks. Okay. Now this was never a challenge to the commuters prior to the Chardham implementation.
Oh, it was not a challenge.
Never. Because I studied in Dharali University, 79 to 1892. I never saw this road was blocked. That particular area was already worked by two people. I would like to take their name, Siddiq and Prashant Rahi. They published a paper in 2020 where they identified this as a highly susceptible area, and their paper was published in Engineering Geology. But the people who are giving this blueprint, or you can call them a DPR, these people have got no really understanding of the terrain. I'm using this word with a lot of responsibility. Why? Because when I saw their DPR, one of the maps that they have put in the DPR was copied from a current science paper by Satya et al. And that map was having no rationale for this work. So that's how the DPR have been prepared. So therefore we said that you cannot go for the uniform cutting of the rocks in this area because rocks have got different characters. Second thing is very important, sir. It's not a very new science which we discovered. There are very good papers that say that any slope if you excavate and if they exceed more than 30 degrees, then there is an exponential increase in the volume of the muck which you are not able to handle and it will have a cascading effect. Even if you give a 24-meter right of way, it will go beyond. So the collateral damage are going to get magnified. I am not saying this. The expert on the road science, they are still saying that. So
if the slope is a bit vertical,
more than they have arrived at a critical number, 30 degrees. It's not they have done a lot of work on that. And we have also done the same exercise in one of our papers which we published on road. We have done it. That the increase from 30 degree onward, the amount of the muck which you generate and the collateral damage increases. This is what we argue. And importantly, which I think he missed to point it out, this is something like 900-kilometer long road, and combined all the 4 areas. They have not carried out any environmental impact assessment. To avoid that, what they did, they fragmented the road to less than 100 kilometers. So they made 53, 54, 53 this thing. Now, our argument was, that is what we argued. We said that you cannot, in Himalaya, road does not follow a linear contour, single contour. It moves up. And we gave an example of, say, for example, Josimat. The river bed is at 1,500 meters, and in 20 kilometers straight, you go up to 3,000 meters. So in the process, your road is traversing through different ecological zones. How can you bypass this? And more importantly, the susceptibility of the terrain to any perturbation varies as the height increases or decreases. So that was our argument. So geologically speaking, I'm not saying anything new. Everybody knows Himalayan for that. In fact, one of the members of the committee, he is an expert. I will not take his name. He is an expert who was not a signatory to our plea, but later on he published a paper where he said that 50% of the Uttarakhand Himalaya is landslide prone.
Landslide prone.
And majority of the landslide are along the roads. And recently a paper has come, in 2025 it has come now, from Rishikesh to Badrinath in Josimat area. They have identified one landslide at every kilometer along the Chardham road.
Less than 1 kilometer.
Less than 1 kilometer. That proves what we are talking about. So the submission is at 5.5 meter, which we call intermediate road width. Is not going to is absolutely disaster free. No, we don't think. But it will have minimal impact. Minimal impact on the terrain that can be handled. And other thing which is very important, I want to point it out, which was also pointed out by one of our members. He was an expert on the road. That member said very clearly that once you construct the road, you have got no funds available for the slope management. You have constructed the road.
Yes.
So what is your slope management? The moment the debris comes, you put a bulldozer and throw the debris downstream. So in this process, I'll give an example. The Kalyasad or Sirobagar landslide, which is 20 kilometers north of Srinagar.
North of Sweden.
It was triggered in early 60s. And since then, this landslide was active. And I'm told that something like 100 crores have been spent on various research. Finally, they had to divert it to another side and so. He said nice thing. This is the word of this gentleman who is from Indian, I think, I'm talking about Dr. Ramani.
Central Road Research.
Central Road Research. He gave a very good suggestion. He said that there should be a provision for the slope management following the construction of the road, which is not there. At this time, we also argued now with Hemant Jani in Delhi. We said that also there should be a provision for preventing the toe erosion. You construct the road on the slope, and there is a river flowing at the bottom. Now the road guy said that we have nothing to do with the toe erosion. Toe erosion should be done by the irrigation department or some other department. So there should be a coupling between the whole thing. So it should be an integrated approach: slope management, road management, and the toe erosion management. Unless you couple all of them together, even if you make 5.5 meter wide road, I'm not saying that it will not collapse unless we really take up this kind of serious measures on the ground.
Okay. So it is like quite amazing that the government, our own government, has tried to manipulate its own laws, environmental considerations, breaking up a project into different parts, 53 different parts, merely to avoid the environmental laws. So, what is there must be some vested interest behind it. What do you think? What is your experience?
Our experience, and particularly this became so clear to me, and I think to all of us, during the first Supreme Court committee on the hydropower projects. We realized how strong the dam construction lobby really could dictate to the government. And these 7 dams that the Prime Minister's office has said that more than half the work is done, one doesn't exist. That whatever was built was totally destroyed by the river. Okay. The company that built it finally went bankrupt because the insurance company refused to uh, give them insurance compensation based on the argument that we had made in our report that the dam was under designed. It had not taken into consideration the possibility of the kind of flash flood that had taken place. And therefore,
Ridiculous.
and the insurance companies, they'll take any argument in their favor, and so that company went under. It does not exist. Similarly, the Tapovan Vishnugad barrage that he referred to, that thing was totally destroyed. And there is so much debris. The flood waters entered that tunnel that was being built. And you can imagine the enormous amount of energy with which this flood water rushes into the tunnel. It takes along a lot of debris, including the debris of the barrage that it destroyed. And that's why more than 200 laborers lost their lives inside the tunnel. They were never found. What impact did this flood have on the walls of the tunnel? Because the tunnel had not yet been completed. It wasn't that they were building a tunnel and then building the wall behind it and so on. And with a reference to some studies done by German scientists and engineers who were hired to investigate some of the problems in tunneling in that tunnel, they had come to the conclusion that in the process of tunneling, the fractures outside of the tunnel that are already existing can be widened and new fractures can be introduced outside the tunnel. So I try to imagine that the amount of energy that this flood and the sediments and debris it brought with it must have been enormous, and who knows how much damage has been done outside the tunnel walls, and that may have triggered the later sliding that was observed in Joshimath, because the sliding before that was far more random and less than what took place after this flood event.
But sir, when you look at Europe, for instance, they have the Alps there and the Andes, and we heard that they have a lot of roads and even railways there. What is the difference? Why can't we have those things in the Himalayas?
Well, I had
specific.
a little bit experience I had in the Alps. Okay. And Alps are the people, Swiss people are the people, they are pioneer in the tunneling. In fact, when you travel there, maximum time you are through the tunnel only. Okay. Their mountains are not as rugged as our mountains. Himalayas we're talking about. Their mountains are more like if you travel from Nainital to Thal or Almora or Kausani. I'm just exaggerating it, but that kind of underrated topography is not a very extreme.
Okay. Kuma was relatively under beauty.
The highest peak is I was there, 15,000 to 20,000 feet high, where the people go to ski. So their mountains are lithologically speaking, rock type wise speaking, they are not very different than ours. Only thing the terrain is not all that extreme, and most important is that their roads are not on the surface. They have dug it through the tunnels. So that's how one of the ways they can protect. The second thing, their science is very, very advanced. Why I'm saying that? There are guys working in Zurich, I've met them. They are working on the tree rings on a slope, and it has got a context and connect that context, and then try to look into the tree rings on a slope because they get the Mediterranean storms coming out from Italian side and create the disturbance on the slopes. So they can tell you when the slope got activated, what was the amount of rainfall, looking into the deformation in the tree rings.
The tree rings.
Okay. The tree which grows on the slopes. Okay. There's citrus deodar which are trees, or pine tree or whatever tree there which has got a good growth rings. So they are working on that. So when they try to build up a scenario of the slope activation time series scenario, so they can tell you that these are the kind of weather events which are going to come in this kind of cycle. Of course, global warming has completely, destroyed this kind of prediction anymore. But this is how they do. So they know. They very clearly demarcated that time, very clearly demarcated the red zone, the yellow zone, and the green zone. And they're continuously monitoring their landslide. And they make it such a beautiful prediction by putting Doppler radars and other kind of things. But I'm not expert in the early warning system, what kind of system people are using, but it is doable. That's why they can protect the people. Back here now, let me tell you an example. Back here, Dharali incident happened. Now, in Dharali, we have got a beautiful forest called the Deodar forest. 6,000 trees are there. They're on a 60 to 70 degree slope, or 50 to 70 degree slope. And there are 5 streams we have counted together. And these streams are all glacial fed streams. Now, if you see the slope between Jhala to Jangla, it's something like 12, 13 kilometer road stretch. Trees, I saw it today morning carefully. The trees are not that much bent. When the slope creeps, the stem have got a convexity toward the slope. Very few will find that having a convexity. Then I called a friend in Bibalsani Institute of Paleoscience. These guys work on the trees. He said that their roots are so strong, so deep and strong. He said that he works in Himachal Pradesh. He said that I have seen that the branches came, they broke the tree, but the stem is intact, standing, still holding the soil. Okay. So in that area, if you see in that particular segment when we travel, we said if you remove this particular tree from this area, 2 things are going to happen. You are going to expose the slope to the vagary of nature. And nature vagary is when I'm talking about extreme rain, avalanches, both debris, and snow. Then you are going to make a cut on the slope vertically. The slope is going to get deactivated. So this kind of understanding, who is going to teach the people? Nobody. Nobody is willing to listen, because in Delhi I just made my opening remark and people are not willing to listen to that way, to somebody in front of someone. I was talking this aspect. They are not interested in this. Okay. To understand the hard scientific facts.
Someone in the government.
And then the important thing is that, but because they are not connected with this kind of studies, of course their job is different. So I don't put blame on them, because they cannot appreciate that. Not that they don't want, that's a different thing. But what is important is, again, I'm answering your question of why the people in Andes and Alps are more, they don't experience this kind of disaster. The point is that when Dharali happened, people started making the read, and they're showing you 5 or 6 pulses of the debris. We call them debris flows. They're debris flows because it's a steep gradient stream, it brings a lot of sediments, and as it exits from the confined path to unconfined path, here is the unconfined path is the Bhagirathi Valley. It opens up like a fancy body. Okay? So the people said, my God, the 5-6 came, it was devastating. This is natural. In any debris flow event, people have already worked it out. It does not evacuate all the material in one shot. But the subsequent pulses are going to become of lesser magnitude. Because the very first event, if you closely watch that video, the sediments, big boulders, they are just jumping up and down. They're coming down. They are moving on a surface which has got a lot of irregularities. So because of the irregularities, you can better explain that, the material when it's moving, it has got a frictional drag. So that first pulse never reaches the farthest point. Because of the frictional drag, it gets retarded. So the first event stops midway. You can see that video first. Subsequent events, what happens when the first event dies out, on the surface you get fine sediments, bit of water that acts as a lubricant. The subsequent events, which are not carrying that much of sediment, they start fanning it out like a concrete cement slurry. And that's how till everything gets emptied out. Now, this was the news to the people here. It should not have been a news. If we would have been, I'm blaming myself. If the scientists in the country would have seriously worked on these aspects of Himalayan debris flow dynamics, we would have educated the local people, the government, that these are the areas where these events can happen, so we should be careful about it. That is what happens.
So my next question is, why are we not learning? I mean, from 2013
I will take that on.
your committee itself was probably an effort to learn. I mean, the state was
Yes.
trying to learn from
Yes.
the Kedarnath flash floods.
And what we have, see, the Prime Minister came to Dehradun December 2016 and he made an announcement that the central government would give the state money to build these, to widen these roads. And that this project would be completed in 2 years. Now, for the implementing agencies, this becomes a deadline. 2 years, we've got to complete this project. So, the kind of geological investigations that should have preceded any work, even the design of the roads and how it was going to be done, everything was based on the understanding of the geology and, as he pointed out, the nature of rainfall in this area. Okay, they had absolutely no time to do that. This was the Prime Minister's orders, and therefore it had to be implemented in 2 years. There is a fair amount, if not enormous amount, of prior experience of road construction in this area. It's not that they were going to widen these roads for the first time. In 2005, 2003, for 3 or 4 years, from about 2000 to 2003, these same roads had been widened. This kind of destruction was not seen at that time.
I see.
There were 2 reasons. One, they did not widen it to a very large width. Okay, it was just a small incremental widening. Secondly, it did not use the kind of machines that were being used this time. Now the heavy earth moving machinery is used, which has enormous energy and can, each time it strikes the slope, it creates, it gives or transfers all that energy it has to the slope. Some of it the slope can bear, other it can't bear. So fissures get introduced, cracks get introduced in the rocks, and the slope gets weakened. Okay, so that was the other reason. But primarily, I would say that there were many studies available. I mean, take the case of that road in Kumaon that they widened. We had gone to see that, Tanakpur-Pithoragarh, and on the first day we had expected to travel something like 80 to 100 kilometers. And we were planning to reach our destination by early evening, say by 5 o'clock or so. We ended up reaching our destination at about 8 or 9 o'clock at night, because there was one of the slopes was almost vertically cut, and it had resulted in a massive landslide, and there was no way we could go ahead. We had to come back to our starting point and take another route. So that particular stretch, Navin pointed out that how many years?
1920.
From 1920.
That landslide is there.
Oh, I see.
And they are going on the same line.
And unconcerned that, I mean, vertical cuts, forget the 30-degree cut. It was a vertical cut. Okay.
So there is no remedy. I mean, we are not learning from whatever is happening.
That's right. And this kind of, I would call it stupidity, that you don't look at your own past experiential knowledge. You don't do any prior investigations, adequate prior investigations, and you go ahead and you subvert the laws. The regulations are weakened. Okay, why is this being done? Why? The example of the construction lobby has always stayed in my mind. And to make a broader conclusion, I would use a phrase that another colleague used last night. He said, Ravi, it's very clear. There is an elite that is driving and benefiting from these projects. They don't pay the price.
Mm. See, you are an engineer, and we know how engineers are like ambitious about a more larger scale than what they have acquired so far. So they just want to keep on advancing the technology. So is that also creating
No,
playing a role in this?
see, you have to know the constraints that nature imposes on you.
Mm-hmm.
And those can be understood by carrying out careful geological and weather investigations. The data is all there, the studies are all there, but provided you read them and incorporate them in your planning and design. And this is why in Switzerland, I would say that kind of very careful, detailed investigation and planning is done.
Mm.
The Ministry of Road Transport had actually done it before 2018 and it come to the right conclusion.
Yes, yes, yes.
And then you don't follow it?
Yeah. So you need probably a holistic kind of
Exactly.
understanding
I
Any
just
project.
wanted to draw your attention to a very one important thing. When we are working on the road project, this committee on the road widening project, that we referred earlier in our report, Uttarakhand government has already published a document in 2014. The document is on climate change, and the title says that let us convert crisis into opportunity.
Okay.
And if you read that document, they have really worked very hard on the document. Every minute details are given over there. Even they talk about if you put a coal tar on the road, how much albedo is going to change. They are also talking about the elevated corridors in order to avoid the tree cutting and destroying the canopy cover of the forest. So they are also talking about how the climate is going to change in time to come and how we should really cope up with that kind of changes. We have no idea. See, let me give you one. I'm again digressing a bit.
Sure.
Let me give you an example. The glove is a kind of a buzzword nowadays. Everybody is talking about glacial lake outburst. Every second guy stand up and say that I want to work on glove. I just went through some literature. Government of India has sanctioned something like DST and other agencies, 40 plus projects on glacial lake outburst floods. I'm not going to become a devil's advocate. I'm going to say that glove is not going to create any havoc. Because the kind of lakes which we have got in this Himalaya, and I will qualify with this statement, which are 0.1 square kilometer, less than 0.1 square kilometers. That kind of quantum of water which is releases and keeping everything constant. Nothing is going to happen in the downstream. Just release that water. How much indentation is going to make, how much devastation is going to make? Insignificant, provided there is nothing on its way constant. I was discussing this in this aspect. But then he pointed out a very important thing that this second aspect is important. And I'm supporting my statement by bringing the South Lunak Lake 2023 disaster.
That's in Sikkim, is it?
Sikkim, Tista Valley. The entire Tista Valley was devastated by that glob generated from South Lunak Lake at 5,000 meters.
Yeah. 2023.
2000 October, month of October. Now, when you look into the whole thing,
Terrible thing. It was.
no. So they look into the lake. Lake is so small and is a carving of the subterranean ice, which is frozen inside the moraine. The glacial deposits within the pore space is got ice because of the warming which is going on, and warming is going to accelerate in the higher altitude compared to the lower altitude in terms of absolute numbers, relative number, not absolute. That collapsed into the lake. From the northwestern side, and there was a splash of some 20 meter water, and that hit the barrier of the moraine, which is 50 meter, and broke it. If nothing else was there, this water would have gone to some distance, and then, like your Rishi Ganga, it would not have been known. But then there was a weather system which was operating for last 1 week from Bay of Bengal, and it was dredged the entire valley for 1 week. So it already primed the slope for destruction and devastation. So much of rain. Then you have got 1200 megawatt projects. But two projects were on the way, I think. They started accumulating the water, the rainwater plus this water, and then the rain. devastation happens. So the question is that whether we are making the roads in the Himalaya or any other infrastructure project, it is very important to inculcate the concept of how the changing climatic conditions are going to impact the stability of the mountain and the hydrological system. Of course, it's a non-linear, I know that. But unless or until you work on that particular direction, uh, not confining yourself to that small patch of the glacial lake, take some remote sensing data for 10 years, itna bad gaya, itna ghat gaya, that's the kind of thing they do. Okay, that is important, I'm not saying that. If you don't have the blueprint of the down valley, what way the infrastructures are coming up? If the water releases and there is a rain, how these infrastructures are going to respond? How the slopes are going to get activated? Which slopes are going to fall? One more important thing is that when in our committee, when the road thing was going on, we pleaded in front of the people, and in fact, many people, many scientists also agreed to that. It is a different thing that later they did not join us. We said, please now leave the higher Himalaya. If you have already widened up to the lesser Himalayan domain, don't get into the higher Himalaya. The reason is, you know why? The higher Himalaya is a steep, narrow valley. Very steep. And the slopes and the river beds are coupled. That means any destabilization happens to the slope, the material gets tumbled onto the river bed and it obstructs. Therefore, one of our studies, which we published in a very good journal, last 1000 years floods in the upper Ganga catchment, particularly Upper Ganga, were not triggered by GLOF. They were triggered by the landslide lake outburst floods from the higher Himalaya. So our priorities are misplaced. Scientific priorities are also misplaced. I'm not saying that we should not be working on the gloves for the safety and security of our infrastructure, but with the glove, the more important things are this. These need to be integrated into the whole thing. Then only what you're saying can make some sense.
Sir, you said one thing. I would like you to shed more light on it. Why is this relative rise of temperature greater in the higher altitudes? Can you please explain?
Yeah,
this?
so that this is going on for last I think 10 years or so. This is called the elevation dependent warming. Now this word is being coined as not very old, new word. Because of the global warming, what is happening that the ice cover and the glacier covers are receding, and the glacier and the ice covers, of course, snow cover and the ice. The snow in Himalaya, if you take about the Upper catchment, the winter snow line comes down to 2,500 meters or so. But the permanent snow line when we talk about, it is above 4,000 meters. So, now those areas are also receding at a very fast rate. What is happening that once the area was covering an X area, the ice, so that means what it is doing, let me put it other way. Ice has got a very high albedo.
Albedo.
90.
You will have to please explain what.
Okay, so ice, what it does when you give an amount of heat to the ice, also solar
Radiation.
Solar the incoming solar radiation when it comes,
Yes.
90% the ice reflects back.
Reflects it.
It
It's
does
white,
not-
so maybe it's the color.
Yes,
white
the
is-
white.
Okay.
It does not absorb it. So that when it reflects back, it does a cooling effect. It's a cooling effect.
Oh, it reflects, so it doesn't warm the.
So that is called albedo.
Okay.
Amount of solar radiation you receive and amount inside back. Okay. So since in the past when the ice covers were extensive, higher altitude were cooler. Now because they are receding at that altitude, say something like 4,000 meter plus, you are exposing the barren rock. Now the barren rocks absorbs 70 to 80% of the solar radiation and reflects back only 10 to 15%. So because of this absorption, you are creating a local heat islands in that area.
I see.
And there are other parameters also. And this is called the elevation dependent warming. Therefore, people are saying that to a given amount of temperature rise due to global warming, Himalaya is going to respond much more strongly compared to the lower altitude. There are some data available with us now, but much more need to be done. But it's a fact now.
Yeah.
So this is going to have a kind of a chain reaction.
I see.
That because of the elevation dependent warming due to the receding glaciers, the temperature in the higher Himalaya is going to rise. And when it rises, then you are going to have more incidence of the rain on the snow. That means the rain which was kind of drizzle at 5,000, 4,000 meters, now you are getting a big raindrop. And this raindrop temperature compared to the ice is more warm. When they fall on the snow, like it happened in 2013 in the Kedarnath disaster, a lot of snow was there, and the rain came on top of it. There was the accidental melting, and then they were suddenly amplified. So this is the reality. So that's the question. So how many our planners, policy makers, and the implementers are aware of this particular fact? Although Uttarakhand government generated and published a very good document, I told you that the climate change, let us convert crisis into opportunity. But how many guys are reading that? Niti Aayog has brought out a lot of documents. There, if you read them, they're fantastic documents. Where is the implementation of the ground? And now don't ask me why it is not happening. That is beyond my capacity.
But it's very interesting. I mean, it's because of global warming that the glaciers are receding, and because the glaciers are receding, the relative heat is increasing.
Absorption
and
relative
it's
heat.
like a vicious circle. It's spiraling sort of, spiraling crisis really. So, it's very serious. And this year we have seen all over these states. I mean, in Himachal Pradesh, in Jammu, Kishtwar, Doda, the Jammu River, the Tavi River. I mean, flood is, unprecedented flood. And there's been a riverfront project going on. So, so many things going on along the rivers, and we are yet not probably able to understand what nature wants us to do and what it doesn't want us to do.
He is following Himachal and I am following for the last 2-3 years only. He can better tell them, because when you talk about Himachal and talk about that particular segment of Mandi to Manali, my blood pressure goes up. Because exactly what he can explain that what is happening.
See, what is the disasters that have happened in Himachal Pradesh have been because of what was done in the last 4 or 5 years. Himachal Pradesh was like Kumaon in this state. It wasn't so bad, but in the last 4 or 5 years, there's been an enormous attempt to rapidly push infrastructure projects into the state. The same kind of problem that we have seen here, that you allow no time for any kind of geological investigation, okay? You don't pay any attention to the existing knowledge, and you just have some. In fact, it's very strange that a couple of days ago, the Minister for Road Transport and Highways, who is responsible for all these projects, he has the gall to say in public that, oh, the problem is about the detailed project report, which is really the design of the road. And these detailed project reports, they don't visit the area. They sit in Delhi, they look at Google Maps, and they make. Well, why did you entrust your road construction to such people? Okay, that's point number one. Second, simple, very simple. Okay, it's the Indian Road Congress, God knows, 70 years ago, they wrote that you should not cut slopes that are more than 30 degrees. Okay. Why are you insisting on cutting those? Third, the British, they almost never built roads in the mountain regions right along the river. And there's some fascination with the idea of a marine drive. Okay. So they have these roads built right along the river side. Okay. And wherever there's a road, commerce will follow. So you'll get shops, and you'll get hotels, and you'll get restaurants, and people will begin to spend nights over there, days and nights. And so we had seen that in 2013 there's a town called Agasthyamuni on the Mandakini River, which is the river that comes from Kedarnath. And the main bazaar of Agasthyamuni had disappeared. That whole slope came crashing down, and it wasn't very much above the river, and the road disappeared. Now, so it's a very simple thing that you try and not build too close to the river. You take your road up on the slope. It's more expensive. We don't want to spend the money. Okay? And I'll once again get back to the Tota Ghati example that he gave you. Tota means parrot. And so we were all wondering, why Tota Ghati? We don't see any parrots around in that valley. Why is it called Tuta? And then somebody told us that this road was built by the British and nobody wanted to come forward to construct that road because of the slope of that mountain.
Okay.
Finally, a local contractor named Totaram took on the challenge. And he was smart enough to know that you can't make a big cut in the slope. And he built a very narrow road. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, Tota Ghati was named after him. And we were all urging the ministry people, the engineers, please do not touch this. And that paper that you referred to, the Siddiqui and Pradhan paper, this was before us. And we pointed that out, please. But they went ahead. And the disasters that followed that, now that slope is probably permanently weakened, and these disasters will keep happening, and defense movement will keep getting restricted. And we pointed out several locations on these roads that are now going to be permanently affected. Every now and then you will have frequent disasters on these roads, which is what you are seeing this year. So a little excess rainfall and you've got problems.
And this is just about the dams again, the floods in the dams. Very nicely things said by, long back I read the paper by Jan Bandapati. He read nicely, I think some economist of BK somewhere. He said that we must keep in mind that Himalayan rivers do not carry energy and water. They carry huge boulders. And this was evident to us when we went to the JP barrage construction. There they said that we said that why did not you open the gate? Because ultimately the flood had to cut the area between the barrage RCC structure and the soft sediment of the mountain slope. From there the water went down and it destroyed Conductor partly and destroyed completely the Govind Ghat, which was in the downstream. Govind Ghat is the area from where you go to the Valley of Flowers. So what did you do? Sir, they said that such a huge boulder came, we were not able to open the radial gate. There were 8-meter diameter gates. Now, learning from that mistake, when I was in 2023, in the month of August in Vyas River flood, in 2023, that happened. Vyas River,
Himachal.
Pradesh.
Okay, Himachal.
So that 9th, 10th, and 11th July was the flood. So I went there, I think, in the month of August. There was a threat going on. Everybody was concerned because there is a Malana hydropower project on Malana Khat. And everybody was panicked because the radial gates were not opening because of the sediment, so much of sediment has come, they just pushed it up. Now the barrage was about to break from the side. Somehow they managed it. So I said, why they have not learned from the mistakes which we have already committed in the Himalaya on the barrage. So the point is that there are examples, as I rightly said, that do not populate the river beds. These are not areas where you can create the marine drives. Well, and there is a law that you cannot construct anything from 100 meters from the river bed. There is law. But these laws are not implemented. I can tell you there is one hotel. If you move from Rishikesh to go to Kodiala, a place where the river rafting takes place, just before Kodiala, look into your left side, there is a monsoon streams coming. On the center of the stream, there is a 4-story hotel. Who gives the permission? Think about Srinagar Garhwal, from where the bridge goes to the Chauras area, just little ahead towards Silkot. There is a multi-story school has come up. It's continuously building up on a nala. And behind that school, there is a tunnel going on for the railways. So we are looking at the whole thing, but it's a kind of philosophical bias, sir. I think it's a philosophical bias. Sir,
I was told by somebody in Harsil recently when I went there that the Prime Minister was there in March this year, just at Mukwa village, and he has advised people to build a lot of hotels. Earn your money from this gham kapo, it seems. That is, all you have to do is just sunbathe and you will earn. Not much work to do. So he was just like encouraged from the top. And so So how
Yes,
is
that's not a bad idea of constructing the hotels. I'm not against that because local can get the jobs. But where to construct them? Which is the location? Who is approving the location? That is most important. Hopefully, after Dharali disaster, there are a lot of disasters happened like this. Okay? We don't learn. Hopefully, from Dharali disaster, something will change. This, but I'm a little bit hopeful. I'm hopeful about it.
like in Jammu, they were saying that there was a big incident at Chashoti, that is just below the Mani Mahesh temple. There was a langar going on, a community meal. That's when there was a flash flood. About 300-400 people. According to records, it's just 150 people. But my sources tell me there were many more people. They were just resting or having meals when that flood started. So it was such a shock for the people there.
So it is not a shock for me, let me tell you honestly. What is shocking for me is this, that our system is not seriously taking into consideration the unpredictable behavior of these streams, particularly during the time of monsoon. This is doable, sir. We can protect the life, provided we focus on these streams. Say, in Har Himalaya, I've got a little bit of idea because I'm working with the Har Himalaya for now 20 to 25 years. The glacial fed streams are highly unpredictable in the sense that they are now, I'm talking about last 5-6 years, they are now going to behave in a manner which we cannot predict. I can quote an example because Dharali was on the debris flow fan. Okay. That was destroyed partly during 2013 disaster. Then what system did, that they constructed an RCC wall to guide the channel. I think the system should have taken a call that time itself because there is a law in place that you please do not occupy this area, which is very difficult, let me tell you. It's not only the system, it's our responsibility as well. I'm putting blame on myself also on that. So we did not do it. Now this time it was done. Contrasting example I'm going to give you from the Ladakh area. I worked in Ladakh, Janskar and the Karakoram side. All the settlements are on debris flow fans. All the settlements. You can see even lays on the debris flow fans because debris flow fans are generated by the glacial fed rivers. Ladakh is a region where people depend on the meltwater which is oozing out either from ice packs or from the retreating glaciers. Okay. These channels which cut through the debris flow fans never ever wavered into the settlement area which are 300 to 400 years old because I'm working on that. I talk to the people, nothing never happened. But for last 10 years, these rivers are constantly now changing their course. And that is because the kind of flow which was regulated from the melt coming out from the glacier is become very much unpredictable because it is coupled with the precipitation and particularly the westerlies. The westerly disturbances intensities are on rise. So, when we are knowing this is going to happen, what is our strategy to protect these areas? There has to be a plan in place. So, there need to be a paradigm shift in our approach towards any infrastructure which are coming up in the Himalayan region. Center point is the climate. And we have got a beautiful modeler, not very expert guys who can really work very hard, give you a lot of good input on this aspect. Why don't we utilize the particular knowledge?
Okay. So these westerlies, they generally come in the winters, is it?
Winter time. We can.
What is this? Why do they come in
These
the winters and suddenly what has happened?
No, these are used to come in the winter, and they were generated from as far away as the Mediterranean Sea and the Caspian Sea, and they would come to the east. That's also because of the global wind circulation system, and there is a belt. I forget the latitudes in which the westerlies flow. They're global belt. Now, due to global warming, scientists have recorded that the weather pattern has shifted. Much of our snowfall, winter snowfall, has reduced enormously. The westerlies have been extending their period of occurrence. We are getting them as late as August of this year. The frequency is increasing. The frequency of westerlies is increasing. He mentioned the ferocity, but along with that, there's the frequency. Now, when they come into the Indian monsoon season, so here the cold winds, westerlies, and there the south, the Indian summer monsoon, warmer air, okay, they tend to create low pressure systems in the Himalayas. You also have very strong clouds, rain-bearing clouds in the over the Arabian Sea. Those clouds may get pulled sometimes if the low pressure is strong enough. It can pull the third stream of rain-bearing clouds and create catastrophic rainfall here. The 2013, as far as I can remember, was just a collision between the westerly and the Indian summer monsoon.
2013 also. The
Yeah,
same thing,
yes.
Okay.
And if you look at it, we've had extreme rainfall events in 2005 in Bombay, okay, 2000 maybe 6 or 7 somewhere around Kashmir. 2000 no 2006 or 7 was in our Barmer area.
Rajasthan.
Massive floods in Barmer of all the places. Shortly thereafter, in 2009 or 2010, it was in the Indus Valley, on the
I was
other
there.
side of the,
I was there.
and so that's the other edge, the western edge of the Thar Desert. The 2013 is here, 2014 is Srinagar. So you see that almost within a period of 10 years, you have so many of these extreme weather events in a very localized area of the globe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we need to really investigate and understand how these systems are their pattern is changing.
Okay.
Okay.
So this is where we should start our infrastructural planning, and settlements, maybe relocations would be required accordingly. Is it something like that? Do you
Yeah, I
visualize
say, what is that? There is a principle that says that if you don't know something, be more cautious. I'm forgetting the name. Precaution principle. Yes. If you don't know, then don't take risks. Be cautious. But our people are not following that principle. In fact, the precautionary principle has been accepted by our own courts in India, that this is a principle that should be used in the design of infrastructure.
Hmm.